Dynamic content cache or caching dynamic data, section 5. So in this section, I'm going to take a look at IndexedDB first and show you how you can leverage IndexedDB and use it in the project or in the application that you have. Also, we're going to talk about some tools and how we can create like service worker and create that like easily instead of writing lots of codes with some tools. So we're going to implement IndexedDB in our final project, and then we're going to wrap up our section, then move on to the next section. IndexedDB, write data. So in this video, I'm going to talk about IndexedDB, and we're going to take a look at what is IndexedDB actually, and we're going to add some data to IndexedDB. So let's jump into the code editor. So I already created a simple project, just a simple project, nothing here, and it's just one app.js file, and it's completely empty. I also created a very simple JSON because I just want to mock our fetch request. Instead of getting from, server, I just want to retrieve it from this JSON file. And you see that this JSON file actually is an object that the key is the ID, and you have the value as an object also here. It's basically a simple entity, respond. So let's go back to our application. I already run npm start, just like always. Remember, before you always have to install the packages, dependencies, and then you have to say npm start. So I'll jump into the browsers, refresh, and then everything is fine. So before we move forward, I just want to explain something about IndexedDB. So IndexedDB actually is a low-level API for client-side storage that you can actually store a lot of structured data like JSON. Unlike, cache API that you have to store request and respond, in IndexedDB, you can go ahead and just store the JSON or blob or files. However, it's good to, if you want to use IndexedDB, that the good thing that you can do with IndexedDB is to store your JSON file or your XML file as a response. That's a transactional database, which means that if you create some transaction and it contains like a couple of data and it's something happen in between, so nothing is going to be written actually to the database. So, and everything is failed. To ensure that everything is correct, because we need to ensure that everything is correct when it's writing to the database. And also it's an asynchronous database, so the API is asynchronous. And the good thing is that we have access in IndexedDB in both web and service worker. But let me just show you the simple, MDN web page. This is the web page that you can go ahead and read more about IndexedDB if you want. However, the API of IndexedDB is super cumbersome and super hard to understand, and it's very confusing. So because of this, there are a couple of, libraries that I want to actually pick 3 of them and explain about them. That they actually wrapped, IndexedDB APIs, and they give us a better API to work with. One of them is Dexy.js. I really like this wrapper. Super easy, very easy to work. And I strongly recommend this. Go ahead and read that. Also, we have ZongoDB. If you are a Node developer or you are familiar with MongoDB, ZongoDB is a wrapper for IndexedDB. However, it gives you an API of similar to MongoDB, which is good. And also a wrapper from Jake Archibald, which is a simple wrapper for IndexedDB, which returns instead of callbacks and those stuff, just a promise. It's promise-based, and API is simpler and better. So I'm gonna stick on this wrapper from Jake. But you can go ahead and try anything else if you want. And before we start, I would like to say that IndexedDB has a very good support in all browsers, And by now we have 94%, support from the browsers in all over the world. So let's move on to our project. So simply, I need to actually first of all add the wrapper from Jake to my project. I'm just gonna download, the wrapper from the repo and then paste it to my project here. Then I need to reference it here, and I'll just say IndexedDB idb mean.js. Good. So let's go to our app.js. What we have to do is we have to kind of define our database name and also our collection, or table, or whatever you want to call. So I'll just go ahead and create two simple variable, database name and my nodes and table names. You can go ahead and define anything else, table name, whatever you like. Just want to keep it simple for now because we want to implement this in our project later and we make it more complex. So go ahead and create the IDB and open the database. This is the version name, and here in the last function as argument, I want to just check if the object store name, because IndexedDB is a key value, or it's a key value database. So I want to just check if this table which I'm going to create it here, it's already exists or not. If it doesn't exist, then I'm just gonna create it here. So pass my table name, and as a second parameter I can pass some configuration and options. Well, the first one is key path, which I can say because my, the thing that I want to store into this table is just this node. I have ID, then I want to actually index everything based on ID. So that's good for now. So let's see what we can do right now. If you want to write some data to IndexedDB with IDB, what you have to do is I will create one simple function, write node for instance, and I will pass my data, which will be an object, right? Then I will return DB promise, which we defined here. Then this is a promise base. Then I said, okay, I have my DB right now. I will go ahead and create my transaction by simply set the db.transaction, pass my DB, which is node, and as a second parameter I have to say what this transaction has access to. Well, I will simply say read and write, or read write means fully access. So this is my transaction, and then on this transaction I can just create my store, which I have to say transaction.objectStore and pass my table. Yeah, I know that it's a little bit confusing why we have to pass like 2 times. This is the way that IndexedDB works. Anyway, so we also create our store, then we will pass, our data. If you want to put, something to the database, you simply have to say store, which we created here, and then .put the object that you want. And basically after this, because we are manipulating the data and then changing the data in IndexedDB, we have to simply return transaction.complete, which is saying that the transaction is done. So you have to do this, and it's very important. So let's go ahead and fetch some data and write data to our database. I'm gonna just simply fetch some data. I will go ahead and fetch my JSON file here, and then because this is a JSON, I need to just simply return the JSON and respond as a .json to have a proper data. And then I will go ahead and here in the next .then I'll say that now I have my data. Because I know this is just an object with a key as an ID, so I'm gonna go ahead and try in for in loop say, and then I get the key, which is basically right now this key, and then this is my data, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and say the whole data here and the key one, which is going to be only this object, and it's the value. So write the value, which is this object right now, and then if it's done, please tell me if it's done. Then let's just do this here. And also, if it's an error, just show me a console log. Let's go to our console, refresh. I immediately see that write node's done. So which means if I go to application, if I just refresh IndexedDB, I should see my DB name and version 1. And then I should see my tables or collection. And these are the documents or rows that you can see here. Basically, the key path is ID, which I'm storing my ID here. So basically, this is the key path. And as you see that this ID and this ID are matched. And these are the value that I can go ahead and retrieve these ID. Let's see how can I retrieve these ID. For instance, how can I get 3 value? So before I go ahead, let me just go back. I'll just comment this out. I already, put everything to database. That's fine. I would mention that because IndexedDB may not be available, in some browsers, it's good to check IndexedDB if it's in Windows or not, or if it's available. So you can check, just like Service Worker you are checking, you can check IndexedDB in Windows. This is just for your reference if you want. So let's define our next function, which is going to retrieve one node from database.